Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monster's Den. We're back with the claws because we are back to horror tonight, and we're going back to Hammer horror for the first time in a while. Davey, when was the last time we talked about Hammer on the show?
Oh, I think we did one-off Hammer favorites, maybe September-ish, something like that.
It
So
wasn't that long ago. Okay.
yeah,
Just
so
seems
always time for Hammer. It's
always
Hammer
time for
time.
Hammer. Yep.
Hammer time to quote the great man. I think was his name Moses. Hammer time.
One of those guys. One of those.
Yeah, yeah, MC Hammer. Yeah.
So, we've tackled the Frankenstein films, we've tackled the Dracula films. Well, of course, gotta have the Mummy films, right? And to help us out here, of course, David Gallagher's in the house and Chris Allo's in the house. We've got a sick Craig Kaminsky. Jamie's tied up in other things, and Dan is tied up in other things. So we figured the trio would take care of it tonight. We'll go back and revisit these four films from Hammer. We'll talk a little bit about them and kind of which ones we prefer, how we would rank them. And we're going all the way back to 1959, right? So we got 59, 64, 67, and 71. I believe I got all those dates right for the four films. And they are The Mummy, which is the original, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. I've got that in this swanky box set here. We've got the 64 film is Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, which is that bad boy right there. From 1967, we've got The Mummy's Shroud. Look at that fantastic looking mummy, right? And then last but certainly not least, the most different film of the four, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. And there actually is no wrapped up mummy in this entire film, although technically the
Hmm.
last scene of the film you could kind of say maybe
Yeah.
would lead into that, but they don't. So yeah. So I don't know, guys. Varying degrees of success on here. I think these are all great looking films. I I watched all of them back to back to back over the last couple days, and like a couple of them I bought on Blu-ray but never actually watched the Blu-rays, and now I like kind of got caught up here. And these are they're pretty spectacular looking films, I think, regardless of what you think of the plots and some of the special effects and costumes and things like that. But I think I don't know. I mean, mummy movies are mummy movies, right? People either love them or they hate them. I feel that way about the Universal films. It's like yeah, there's parts of them I like, but they all follow like a similar kind of plot and formula, and ultimately they can be a little dull. You got a guy walking around, if you got Lon Chaney, he walks around a certain way. If you got the Hammer ones, they walk a certain way. They're a little faster. They're just yeah, that's also and different actor plays the mummy in each film, which is kind of interesting. And it's like different people working on the makeup and the costume and the wraps and everything. So they all look completely different from each other, which to me frustrates the hell out of me. Because at least on the Universal side, the mummy always looked fairly similar for the most part, except for maybe when what was Tom's name? Second mummy film. The guy who played the mummy before Chaney did. Can't remember.
Yeah, after Boris and before.
Yeah.
You
But
got me
anyway,
beat.
so Davey,
Tom Cruise.
what's that?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, yeah. I know it's Tom something. I just can't remember his name. I know they had the one guy who was different, who played him, other than Karloff and Cheney, but and he looked a little bit different than the Cheney kind of design or whatever. So we got four films. Why don't we'll start with Davey. Why don't you, Davey, give us your fourth favorite and your third favorite, and we'll kind of go around and we'll work our way back to the top two. So what do you got for four and three?
Okie dokie, picking the pokey. So I'll kind of lump them in then since we're doing two at a time. Because on one of our shows quite a while ago, I think we did something like most overrated or something like that. And I said Hammer's Mummy.
Shocked
Because
everybody.
yeah, because people associate me with liking Hammer a lot. To me, it's one of the most overrated, which isn't to say that I don't like it, because it's not my bottom. My bottom is Curse of the Mummy's Tomb from 1964, which I should say they've all got something to commend them. They've all got a look. It's interesting that they decided to make these standalone movies. It wasn't a conscious decision, but they didn't go the route of having a recurring character. So they went the route that they had for their Jekyll and Hyde movies or their Robin Hood movies, just standalone movies. every time. And for this one in 1864, it's very similar to that 1959 Mummy. I don't think it does enough to differentiate itself, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. We've even got George Pastel, who's, to me, the star of these first two movies. He's the guy with the fez, the Egyptian. He's actually from Cyprus, but it doesn't matter. He's the kind of star of these first two movies for me. And in that second one, I love that he plays a character who goes along with the excavation and the, what we now call cultural appropriation and whatnot. And they do discuss a lot, which you wouldn't think for films of this time, about is it right to take these bodies from their natural resting place and put them in museums? And in this film, they treat it a little bit more comically by having a rather over the top American character played by Fred Clark from the Beverly Hillbillies. He's very much a Carl Denham type, to give it a kind of King Kong vibe. The original idea for the film was that the mummy would be 20 foot tall, which was on the original poster. And they kept the poster looking like that, even though there isn't a 20 foot. I'd love to see how Hammer would have realised that, but regardless. But George Pastel brings a kind of grounded quality to it of saying, maybe we shouldn't do this. We should respect my country's culture. And he's got a great part in this film. The flip side of that is our leads are pretty bad. Ronald Howard, not to be confused with Ron Howard, is the son of the great Leslie Howard of Gone with the Wind, Scarlet Pimpernel, and he's just not an interesting lead here. He's not given anything particularly interesting to do, but he's very dull, very flat. There's not a lot of action, if you like. There's a few good attack scenes from the Mummy, but again, we're very much doing kind of greatest hits of what you'd expect from a Mummy movie. It feels like they've just kind of put the Universals into a blender, which is also something you can say about the first film. It is quite brutal in places. Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. You do have a constant hand decapitation being quite a recurring theme goes through it. Terence Morgan as Adam Beauchamp plays a kind of mysterious character who has I think, quite an interesting twist towards the end of the film, as to the nature of his true character and who he is. It doesn't make a lot of sense that he would look the way he does, given what happens. But I like that our mummy here has a little bit of agency, and he isn't mindless. So he does the mindless things for the most part of the film, but then kind of rebels towards the end.
Yeah, he does.
So it's kind of interesting that we have a mummy that does have something left from, to separate them from just being zombie-like.
Could arguably say that this film is the most violent of the four.
Probably, and the most.
So that lasts like 45 minutes or so, right?
Yeah, maybe tied with the third film, but and then yeah, the original film would be kind of second bottom for me, but although it's second bottom because Curse is real, have to have one copy, two copies,
Of course.
three copies,
Wow.
and that's the iconic
See,
cover
Chris,
for
it's
me.
not just you.
No, it's true, and for sure, Dave. You're right. There's Hammer's going to come out with one of these five disc deluxe box sets. So
I don't want to comment on that, but I know someone is doing the commentary for that.
see,
So,
there you
yeah,
go. So yeah, I'm lucky. I only have two of the ones that Davey just showed off. So
So the original film, I mean, not to repeat myself too much from that episode from 100 years ago, whenever we did it, I think it's just too flat. Peter Cushing is very rarely for Peter Cushing, I think, miscast. The parts are very young, plucky character, and his father's in it and whatnot. And Peter Cushing's just a bit too old to be playing that kind of juvenile lead. He does give it a go, but again, I don't think there's enough to work with for the main part in the original. George,
I'm not set with him with the hot young wife either. That's just kind of, yeah, because they're
yeah,
tremendous
and
years in between the two of them.
it's an hour in before the wife is revealed, so that we go, oh my goodness, she looks like the Egyptian princess.
Yeah.
Which apparently Peter Cushing has never realized, even though he has an actual picture of the Egyptian princess. And he's going, do you know something? I've been looking at this picture for years now, and Turns out it's a picture of you.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, they don't do the whole, which a lot of mummy films do. It's a direct reincarnation and whatnot. They don't do that. They just kind of say she looks similar. So they don't hint that it's a descendant or reincarnation, anything like that. But they don't do anything terribly interesting with the idea. I like the scene where George Pastel, again, pretty much playing the same character in both of these films, comes to them at the very start and says, "Please, I'm begging you, don't excavate this stuff. You will be cursed." So it's not a mustache twirling villain performance from him. He does give them an out. He does say, "Look, please don't do it. Please, I'm begging you, please don't do this." And then, of course, they do it anyway, and we have the traditional they who open the tomb are cursed immediately and blah blah blah. You get a great scene though where Peter Cushing goes to his house and kind of they have a taunting battle between they both know that the other is kind of against their interests and Peter Cushing's dissing the Egyptian god that George Pastel worships. He's saying, he's a rather third grade god. Only an idiot would worship that sort of god. And George Pastel's sitting going, there's a really cool flashback scene. I think that's probably the highlight of the film for me is to see the flashback where we see Christopher Lee as Caddis in his pomp, and we see the affair that he has with the Egyptian princess that leads to him being mummified and forced to uh, be the protector of her for all eternity. I think the first two films flashbacks do go on a bit too long. We kind of were introduced to every single individual along the procession on parades and whatnot. Don't think we need all that. But as you say, Pete, it is a good chance for us to see the wonderful designs because on the first film especially, it's Terence Fisher directing, it's Jimmy Sangster doing the script. So it's A-list Hammer guys, but crucially Bernard Robinson is doing the set design. And I think that really elevates that first film. It looks gorgeous, especially the actual tomb itself. Looks spectacular and it's got great lighting coming from all directions, green lights and pink lights and things. It looks great. One of the best looking Hammer films of the period. I think let down by the ending entirely though, where they do just borrow one of the endings directly from is it the Mummy's Shroud? I always get the Universals mixed up, but they pretty much just borrow the ending, with going into the mud pit straight from that.
And when you think
Um,
about it, why would the mummy go walk into something that's kind of liquefied, right? That doesn't make any
yeah,
sense at all.
and the same year, um, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing were in Hound of the Baskervilles for Hammer. And what's the end of that? The baddie ends up going into tar pits.
Yeah.
And so exactly the same ending kind of thing, which I don't know, works a little better in Sherlock
You've seen
Holmes than it
Dracula
does.
go into water too, right? So it's like a
Yeah.
recurring theme. Yeah.
So it's not terribly interesting. I know it's iconic for a lot of people, but to me it's like baby's first mummy movie. It just hits all the beats that you'd expected to hit, but it doesn't do anything particularly interesting with it. It feels like we've got all the gang back together that have done Frankenstein and Dracula. Let's just do a mummy movie. But Jimmy Sangster put a great twist on Frankenstein and a great twist on Dracula, mostly because they had to for legal reasons. They couldn't step on Universal's toes. But I don't think he was putting such a great twist on this. I think they just borrowed quite a lot because by this point they did have a Universal deal, so they didn't need to kind of write around copyright. But yeah, so the first two films for me are the least of the films. So The Mummy 1959 and Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. A lot to recommend them. I don't think any of these are absolute stinkers by any stretch of the imagination, even though I think The Mummy itself is massively overrated because it's just an iconic character. But yeah, still fun watches, still pleasant ways to spend a rainy bank holiday.
You could probably say that one of these films is overrated, and I think one of them is really underrated.
Yes, we'll definitely come to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Chris, what do you got for your bottom two?
All right, my bottom two. Yeah, my number four. I know a lot of people like this one, and I agree. I don't think any of them are total stinkers. But I got really mad at this one, and it's The Mummy Shroud, 1967. Before we went live, I was mentioning to Pete and Davey while I was watching these movies in my movie room, and literally in the middle of The Mummy Shroud, I fell asleep. And then my wife called me, and she's like, "Hey, what are we doing for dinner?" And I was like, I slept through probably half the movie, and I ran out the door and locked myself out of my movie room. So I had to call a locksmith, and they had to come pick my lock. So this was the single most expensive um, Monsters Den assignment I've ever had. So I was pissed off at my wife for calling me and waking me up. I was pissed off at Pete Pardo for assigning this thing. I was pissed off at my buddies because had to move my cars in the back of the movie room instead of in the driveway. And if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have locked myself out. So a whole bunch of shit happened. So I'm just mad at the Mummy Shroud. Then I had, of course, had to rewind it, and then I was kind of dozy through it. But I don't know. I didn't like the Mummy. He just kind of looks kind of shitty.
What's the
He
worst
kind of
looking mummy in this whole
yeah, by far, Pete.
yeah.
Of the four movies, he definitely looks the worst. I mean, he definitely looks like he's gonna just crumble. And at the end, this is the one where he does crumble at the
Yeah.
end, right? So I guess that's kind of fitting. He just crumbles like a cookie. Man, I think I had to watch the opening of the movie three times because there's this whole flashback where it's like, and it looks like it was really cheap. They're like, there's so much exposition. They're like, okay, there's this pharaoh and he attacks this pharaoh and he's got the kid and the kid's got the bodyguard and they got to go in the desert and they're in the desert and the handlers are dying and I'm like, wait, what? How much of this do I need to know? So yeah, this one, I just didn't like this one that much. Maybe one of these days when they come out with that 5 disc set, I'll buy it again. But yeah, Mummy Shroud, I'm putting at the bottom. My number three, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb from 1964. Yeah, this one it was okay. I did like this one better. I kind of like Fred Clark, who Davey mentioned as the Carl Denham character, or like the P.T. Barnum character. There's this kind of love triangle, and the female, I don't remember her name, she kind of comes off like a slut in this because she's engaged to this guy and he wants to marry her, and then she immediately meets this dude, and she is on him like fucking white on rice. And while you're watching the movie, it's like it is so obvious that this guy is the heel. And of course, wouldn't you know it? Like 5 minutes later, you find out, of course, he is the heel. I think
And
Davey
she's doing
mentioned.
this right under the husband's nose.
Oh, right there,
And
yeah,
literally, like he walks into the room
100%.
like after they're like making out and stuff, and it's like, what? What's going on here? It's
And
crazy.
okay, the heel is a better looking guy than the
Well,
old man
yes,
that she's
yes.
she's originally hooked up with, but still, she just seemed kind of like a whore. And Davey mentioned the greatest hits thing. Yeah, I mean they redo the same fucking shot where the mummy bursts through the glass door, but from the original, but it just doesn't look nearly as good. The mummy, yeah, he's definitely not nearly as good as Christopher Lee. And yeah, like Davey mentioned as well, holy shit. I don't remember it as much in the first movie, but I started to make notes in the second and third movies, and I think and it happens in the fourth movie too. Like, how many fucking severed hands are there in this franchise? Like, movies two, three, and four, there's like chopped off hands everywhere. I'm like, for a franchise that really has nothing connecting it other than there's a mummy, yeah, then there's also like a lot of severed hands, which I thought was kind of cool that they were actually, showing that a little bit in the 60s.
And the blood pumping from the severed wrist, right?
Yes.
It's like nice and close up
100%.
shot.
So I thought that was, again, for me, that's the thing what I like better about the Hammer movies than let's say the Universals, right? They're in color. You do get a little bit of blood, and yeah, of course, all the nice heaving bosoms from the 60s and 70s. But yeah, those are my bottom two mummy movies.
All right. Well, I will agree. I'm going to go with The Mummy Shroud at number four. I like this film. I honestly think this might be the best looking film of the four. I mean, there's some gorgeous set designs here, and the costumes are really well done. The weird thing about this film is, though, it takes a long time to kind of get going. There's like a lot of setup in the beginning. I almost feel like I'm watching like an Agatha Christie like interpretation here for a while. But then once the mummy kind of comes in and does his thing, it gets really good. There's a good amount of violence. I agree. The mummy in this film looks absolutely horrible. It's almost like, like picture like a little kid's classroom, right? Where they're in like home ec or something like that, or art or whatever. And Rich Catino is the teacher, right? And they've got like, or they take all these old like kitchen smocks and what do you call the hot plate things, cut them all up and just kind of patch them all over the mummy. I mean, you can even see it on the back here. I mean, he just looks ridiculous. Nothing matches. It doesn't look like bandages. It looks like all this stuff put together. And like in every other scene, the kind of like the mask piece that they have on him looks completely different. But he's pretty, he rampages around pretty good. Maybe doesn't run as fast as Christopher Lee. That's the one thing I never understood, man. Christopher Lee was like running marathons in that first film. I don't remember any other mummy in any other movie as fast as Christopher Lee, but it's good. It's a really good looking film. The acting is really well done. I mean, it's got Andre Morell in it for crying out loud. I mean, he's always great in anything he does. So, but yeah, really good looking movie. It's got its moments, but I got that at number four. Number three, I'm also going to go with The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Again, slow to start, pretty good acting though. I think the last like half hour, like I mentioned, the last half hour, 45 minutes is just full with violence. And to Davey's point, I think what's cool is that as like crazed as the mummy gets in this film, he still seems to have some sort of wits about him about when he should and shouldn't do things. And it's like at the end, then when he kind of like turns a little bit, it's like, okay, that's it. He's not doing anything else. He's now moving off on his own a little bit, but really well done. Another great looking film. Yeah, the mummy doesn't look as good as he does in the first film. I think as each one of these went along, they had less and less money for the budget for the costumes for the mummy or the makeup or what have you. But it just appears to me that they spent a lot of money on these mummy films, on set designs, on costumes to make everything look great, and then they had nothing left for the actual mummies. That's just what it seems like to me when you would think that you want to make him as good looking as possible, but whatever. But enjoyable film. I just think I like the other two a bit better. So yeah, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Mummy Shroud are my bottom two.
Well, I'll go straight into Mummy Shroud then because it's my number two, which I've got in this big box of all the Studio Canal stuff from Australia. Um, I really like Mummy Shroud. So this is although the first two a little bit in different tune. I think Peter Cushing's underused and underwritten, but Christopher Lee gives a great mime performance. And then the second one, don't like much of the stuff at all. Mummy Shroud is where it goes into actually this really good category for me. It's got a much more serious tone. I think the first two have got a kind of old-fashioned boys' own adventure kind of tone. It fits in almost with the Pirates of Blood River kind of things that Hamill were putting out in the early 60s. Whereas by the time of 67, Mummy Shroud is a little bit more serious. Certainly the one after that's even more serious, but you can see the progression with Mummy Shroud. It's definitely the most inspired by Tutankhamun, the Howard Carter expedition with Lord Carnarvon and whatnot. There's certainly a lot more of the original curse that people kind of know from when was that, 23, something like that, 1923, the Howard Carter expedition, something like that. Andrew Morell totally underplays the role, which I really like because I love Andrew Morell. He's one of my favorite
Oh,
Hammer
he's
actors.
fantastic. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My favorite Quatermass. He's a brilliant Watson. He's wonderful in Shadow of the Cat. I mean, you could do a whole episode of Andrew Morell. But in this, he doesn't play it over. Andrew Morell, especially in something like Cash on Demand, can go a little bit over the top into not quite camp, but certainly playing to the back row, very knowing, with a glint in his eye. But in this, he plays it like he does in one of his war movies, which he did quite a few of. It gives it a realism and a grittiness that you don't really associate with Hammer horror too much. So Andrew Morell kind of gives it a grounding. And he's only in half the movie, but it's the important half that kind of sets everything up, really. And as you say, Pete, Agatha Christie's all over it for me. The way they set it mostly in a hotel where they keep coming back to it.
And this big, huge cast, right? Which is
Yeah,
totally Agatha Christie. Yeah.
and then almost proto slasher like, and then there were none. They just keep getting bumped off, which very Crystal like as well. One person we haven't mentioned, and I love that he's in all three of these first movies, Michael Ripper.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him.
An absolute Hammer icon.
Yeah, he's great.
His parts in these are so memorable. I mean, in this one, he gets one of his biggest roles, Long Barrow, where he's got the glasses and whatnot, and he's got a lot more to do in it than he does in most Hammers. It's great to see. Michael Ripper is one of the true heroes of Hammer horror. Um, it's very stylized in terms of the deaths. So whenever someone dies, it's not just like the other ones, a lumbering mummy comes into the room and just whacks them and, end scene. It's always done very intentionally where the person, for whatever reason, can't see the mummy. In Michael Ripper's case, it's because his glasses are smashed and we see a blur. In one of the other cases, it's because they have a blanket over their head, so they literally can't see. In one of the other cases, it's from behind and he sees it in a reflection in a glass. So in each of the cases, it's a chance for the director to just show a bit of flair in the kills, which again is very slasher-like to how can we make the kills a bit more interesting. There's even one in a sleeping bag that would be, something that would pop up really later on in Friday the 13th. Was it Jason Takes Manhattan, the one with the sleeping bag? Um,
There wasn't Jason Takes Manhattan, I don't think. Was that part 6?
it was one of the later ones. I
He's,
know that one.
yes, he smacks the girl against a tree.
Yeah, when the mummy has someone in a sleeping bag and lifts them up by the end of it and throws it out the window. Pretty much the same gag.
That was funny.
So great to see that. It's directed by John Gayling, who directed like The Reptile and whatnot. Really good director for this period of Hammer, and it's shot by Arthur Grant, not Grant Arthur, Arthur Grant, who is a brilliant cinematographer and was all over Hammer at this point in time, and it was given it a real quality, a real touch of class in the way he shot everything, where it just looks better. It just looks visually more interesting. Odd angles and interesting cuts and dissolves and fade outs and whatnot. There's some good female roles in this one. As Chris mentioned, some of our characters, like the main lady in the second film, Jean Rowland's character, very flat. But in this one, Mummy Shroud, there's three quite interesting female characters, including the old kind of psychic soothsayer type old hag. She's almost a witch.
Yeah.
And she's dribbling and whatnot. She's a great character. It's Catherine Lacey, who was in The Sorcerers with Boris Karloff, amongst many things. She was a Michael Powell regular. Just a more interesting set of female characters for the cast to have up against them. It's the last Hammer film shot at Bray Studios, so it's sentimental for any Hammer lover because we know that Bray set inside and out. We know, the pub, for example, when they go to the bar in any Bray Studios film, it's always that same bar. Michael Ripper's there in the first Mummy where he goes in and, 10 feet tall it was, 10 feet tall, a monster. It's always the exact same bar. It's always the exact same staircase. It's always the exact same ballroom at Bray Studios, but it's charming. So it's kind of sad to see the last of Bray Studios in '67, but it's good to see it go out with a bloody good film. Really entertaining. I think it ends perfectly. Love the little story. Maybe one or two more things I would change. Maybe Andrew Morell doesn't bite the bullet halfway through and gives you a bit more quality throughout it. But yeah, there's really nothing too wrong with this film at all. Quite underrated. Not as underrated as the one we'll come to now, which is my number one, which is in this box set, Hammer Film Edition from Germany, which is should have had it ready. Teams in Mind.
Yes, because I saw Pete with the nice shirt.
Yep, there you go.
And yeah, another severed hand.
Blood
Yes.
from the Mummy's Tomb. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. So loosely based on Bram Stoker's Jewel of the Seven Stars. It was a support film for Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. Now, if I had gone to the pictures in 1971 and got a double bill of Blood from the Mummy's Tomb and Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde,
Yeah, that's
that
a
would be
great
the
bill.
best cinema ticket I think I'd ever bought in my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And it has to be mentioned. I'm not someone who focuses on this in a lot of films because, we don't want to be too over the top. But in this film, Valerie Leon is fucking stunning. Like,
Unbelievable.
and I don't mean that in a misogynist way. She's presented like that. I mean, when she's the princess, the Egyptian princess lying in state, and there's underboob galore in the costume that
And
she's
she's
got.
lying in that coffin throughout the whole movie. You see
Oh,
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right?
but she looks great.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
And it's a total celebration of her form. So it's not making her a victim. It's not sexualizing her in that regard. It's just she knows how sexy she is, and she's using it in this film. Sadly, Peter Cushing was originally cast in this and dropped out because his wife Helen died. So you can pinpoint exactly when this happened. And then oddly, the director of the film, Seth Holt, died 5 weeks into filming. So it had to be finished by Michael Carreras, the producer. So it was a total mess of a shoot. Your lead actor drops out, has to be replaced by the great Andrew Keir, my second favorite Quatermass. So Andrew Keir is fantastic in it as well. I don't quite buy him as Valerie Leon's father, but hey, regardless. Hammer often struggled to marry gothic feels with modern settings. Dracula AD 72, perfect example. Just doesn't work. It feels like you've just cut two movies into each other. Here's a Dracula scene and here's a swinging London scene. They don't feel like they work together at all. This film, it marries them perfectly. It does feel in the 70s. It feels a bit swinging 60s, kind of bleeding into the 70s, but regardless. Um, and the Gothic works perfectly too. So when we go into the Gothic scenes, it doesn't feel like we've jumped into a completely separate film, because we've got characters who kind of have a foot in each world. Andrew Keir's a grounded actor. Valerie Leon is a modern seeming actress, but she also looks like she could be an ancient figure, a Cleopatra type. We have James Villiers playing the kind of villain who's pulling the strings, and again, he's playing it very straight for James Villiers, the poshest English guy whoever was. But he's playing it very straight for him. When we get flashbacks in this film, they're very dreamlike, crossfaded with stars in the actual visions. So we're not given a lot of flashbacks like the previous ones where we go into an 8 minute long sequence and we have to, as Chris said, who's this and what? So that's the Pharaoh's brother, but he's been deposed, and we have to remember that. But it's not the Pharaoh's brother who's the mummy; it's actually the protector of the Pharaoh's brother's mummy. What?
Yeah.
None of that in this. It's very clear, but it does have that kind of dreamlike quality that you get when Valerie Leon's kind of drifting off almost into the astral plane, which is something she talks about at a couple of points. So it's a bit more of a metaphysical film in some regards. Wonderful imagery of the perfectly preserved mummy corpse. It's very uncanny that, hey, we've got a mummy here, but she's not in bandages and she looks as if she's been laid in state yesterday, never mind thousands of years ago. That the hand we've mentioned a couple of times, the severed hand, very disturbing imagery when we see the hand stump that just keeps bleeding and bleeding, but never bleeds out. It's really disturbing. And then we do see the hand doing a thing from the Addams Family and going off in its own adventure.
That's a great scene.
That's funny.
A bit like Dr. Terror's House of Horrors had the Amicus hand, and that went off in its own adventures, taunting Christopher Lee. This very similarly, this one goes off in its own adventures. There's great imagery with when we have again another flashback that feels important, doesn't feel forced, where we see the mother of Valerie Leon's modern character dying in childbirth, and then we see the child dying for a second, but then coming back to life, and it all comes full circle towards the end and leaves us with, I think, one of the best endings to Hammer film, where, as Pete mentioned, we don't have a mummy in bandages until the very last scene of the film, and we're not sure who's woken up. what version of Valerie Leon has indeed woken up? We'll never know because then credits. But it's wonderful. It gives you something to guess, and it's a real bloodbath as well, where every character in it dies, every single one apart from Valerie Leon, and we don't know if that's the good Valerie Leon or the evil princess is now going to take over or whatever her wicked plan may be. It's just a great one and done, and I think, for my money, one of the most underrated hammers. When we were talking in the group chat the other day, and Jamie said it, they kind of roll into one for him. I know exactly what he means if he was just thinking of the first couple, but for me, this episode is entirely worth it if we turn people onto the wonderfulness that is blood from the mummy's tomb, because it's a remarkable one and done, which shouldn't be as good as it is with all the problems behind the scenes. I mean, the director dying halfway through shooting, for goodness sake, still comes off brilliantly.
Well, that's a
Wonderful
rare feat,
performance.
right? In film, where you have
Yeah.
a production that was absolutely plagued from start to finish. Generally, films like that don't end well. This one, complete opposite. It's like, well, whatever happened, all the craziness that went on, the movie still came out great.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I mean,
wouldn't
if there
change it.
ever was a movie that should have been called, Curse of the Mummy, it was
Yeah,
this one.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I absolutely recommended. Highest recommendation is, I wouldn't say it's top five Hammer or anything, but for me, it's a real gem. It's a hidden gem, like Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde or Hands of the Ripper, one of those kind of, or even The Lost Continent, which I've got a lot of time for. Just one of those like just hiding under the surface a little bit. It's not a Dracula, it's not a Frankenstein, so you might not find it straight away if you're not a big Hammer fan. But believe me, it's absolutely worth it. And because it's standalone, you don't need to see the first three, obviously, so you can just jump straight to this one, folks, if you haven't seen it.
Right.
Please do. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So there we go. It's my number two and number one.
All right. Chris, how about you?
All right, yeah, Davey pretty much summed it up. That's his number one is my number two. Just squeaks under the original. I love Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. I know I've said many times, Valerie Leone in this. It's the greatest underboob in cinematic history. It's just she is just amazing to look at without sounding creepy at all. Like whenever she is on screen, it's like just totally commanding presence. She's great in the whole, dual role. I like the reincarnation thing. Exactly what Davey said. This movie is so different from the rest of the franchise, and it really is crazy that it's a mummy movie where the mummy is this hot broad and there's no fucking mummy in bandages. I
Yeah.
mean, other than that one very bit at the end, like I was wondering, and I mean, I was born in 1971, so this was, I was too young for this, but I wonder, did anybody go to this movie? And even, Pete's got the shirt, which is the movie poster, just like, Davey showed the Blu-ray cover, which is taken from the original movie poster. But I would love to know, did anybody go see this in 1971 and then was disappointed that there wasn't a mummy wrapped up in dirty bandages, because there really isn't. But I think, again, to echo Davey's comments, I think that's what makes this so unique and so fun and just so freaking different of a mummy film. And it's my number two. It just barely got squeaked out by number one, but from the original from 1959, just because I love Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and I love them together. I've said many times I am named Christopher Lee, after Christopher Lee. And I'll be honest, most of the Mummy movies, not really very scary. Like as a young kid, when I first saw this one, I thought Christopher Lee as the Mummy was fucking terrifying. When he bursts through the glass door and Peter Cushing shoots him and he just fucking brushes it off, and then Peter Cushing stabs him with the harpoon and he just breaks it off. I mean, he's just terrifying. I love when it doesn't make any sense, since he's all made of dust. but I think it's super cool when Christopher Lee goes in the swamp, and I just think there's a lot of like the flashback, like Davey said as well, when Christopher Lee is in human form and he gets his tongue cut off, and apparently there was a snippet of the
The
tongue
actual
actually
tongue, yeah.
being cut. Who knows? Maybe if we're ever lucky, if I don't know if that footage survived, but I really liked the original Mummy. I think it's a lot of fun. And yeah, that's my number one pick. But yeah, I mean, for me, this franchise is really the original and Blood from Mummies too.
One thing about Peter Cushing's performance, although I don't think they've given him enough to do, he was such a delicate and careful actor that Hammer were notorious for making the posters and then making the film. So the poster would come out to kind of sell it in pre-publicity, and then they'd make the film around the poster. So the poster for the Mummy came out before they shot a single frame, and the poster was that
Oh, right, with the
with
lightning bolt.
with
Yeah.
the light coming through it. And Peter Cushing on set said, "We can't promise that and then not deliver it." So Peter Cushing said, "I need to have a scene where I put like a harpoon through the mummy's chest, so that this is represented on screen and nobody can say they were ripped off." So Peter Cushing was that gentleman-like that he didn't want people to think that this poster was lying to him. So he insisted on that scene himself.
And it's a great scene.
Yeah.
Pete,
Volume Pete.
you're on mute.
Sorry, my wife was calling on the phone, so I put myself on mute so you didn't hear the phone ring. But yeah, I had a really hard time between my number one and two. Um, and I think if you would have asked me this a couple of weeks ago before I rewatched all of these again, I might have done it a little bit differently. Ultimately, I went with The Mummy as my number two. I like it a lot, and I agree with Chris. Even though Christopher Lee himself would probably tell you he hated doing this role, and he's gone on record saying that many times, because we know he didn't like roles where he couldn't talk and whatnot. But I think he's absolutely menacing. He's probably, when you think about it, out of all the actors who have portrayed mummies in films, I think he's definitely the most menacing and scary. To the point almost at times, though, it's like he's like I mentioned before, he doesn't move like a mummy. He's running around fast, and I always found the way he like shakes his head. You ever notice that? I went out the other night watching. I'm like, why is he always moving his
It's
fucking
it's
head?
like it's on, but it's loose.
It's loose, right? It's like it's ready to
Yeah.
fall off or something. I'm like, God,
He's
straighten
like
that thing up, man. You know?
he's like, remember D'Lo Brown?
Dude. But otherwise, I think he does a great job, and yeah, it's maybe not as I don't think this film is as what's cinematic looking as some of the ones that would come after it. But I think still for its time, I think it's really, really well done. And yeah, I agree to an extent that Cushing's character probably need to be fleshed out a little bit, but I really enjoy it. I think it's really good, and it's got a good amount of action in it, and it's my number two. But ultimately, I decided to go with, and I surprised myself here. I decided to go also with Blood from the Mummy's Tomb as well. First of all, yes, Valerie Leone or Leone, however she says her name, is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you can't take your eyes off of her when she's on the screen. And, half the movie she's walking around in that little like negligee thing she's
Right.
wearing. And I don't know about you guys, but there's a scene later in the film where she's kind of lying down on the bed and she's got the little pink nighty thing on. You can see a little in one. If you didn't catch it, go look. It's there. It's there. But anyway, not meaning to sound gross here or anything like that. But I mean, she's just drop dead gorgeous. But I think I really like, the beginning of the film, she plays like, kind of like the scared starlet and whatnot. But as she starts to get more taking control over obviously the Egyptian goddess via the ring. She really takes on this kind of menacing tone throughout it, and I think that's when she does her best work in this film. It's pretty bloody. It's definitely got its chills and whatnot. It's a great looking film, great cast, and like Davey said, I mean, like everybody dies in this movie. It's like crazy, and I think they really took a chance on this movie, trying to do something a little bit different with the whole mummy mythology. I think it works great as a standalone film. I'd almost argue it's like I would have kind of liked to see a next movie. Maybe it's just perfect the way it is, but I would have been okay with like a follow-up to this. And you figure it's 1971, right? So we still had a few years of Hammer left. And another thing, how did they not cast her in another film like
Oh,
after?
totally.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean she's in a couple of Bond films, and
Yeah.
she's like the receptionist. She's not even a Bond girl. She's just little parts. I mean, she wasn't a great actress, but she had great presence, which is all you need to play that kind of part, to be honest.
I mean, I totally agree, Pete. When I was watching it, I was like, Jesus, how was she not a seductive vampire in another Hammer production? I'm
Yeah,
like, this is
Yeah.
why is she not
unbelievable.
in Vampire
Or
Circus?
yes, even Vampirella. Like, oh, was
Yeah,
she not even in the running for that?
yeah. Yeah, wonderful. And what I like about that film as well is there's no hero. I mean, Hammer would always have the really bland male lead, and you think
They
that
tried to make the boyfriend a little bit, but really he
you th
wasn't either.
you
No, he's
think
got
you
like nothing
think
to do.
you think they're going that way, and then he hits her.
Yeah.
So it says to you, this guy's a prick. You know,
Yeah.
he's a wife beater for goodness sake. So, it's pretty much saying there's no heroes in this film. You don't need to worry about, like the Dracula films would always have a character called Paul. We've joked about it before. The Frankensteins would always have Hans, and they would always be really bland characters, really, really dull, flat characters, like the boyfriend could be here. But it kind of leads you up the garden path to think he's going to be that sort of character, and then completely subverts it, completely changes it. It's a remarkable little film.
Yeah. Yeah, really good. And I think give Hammer a lot of credit for not, I mean, when you really look at it, they never really did a remake or reimagining, so to speak, of the very, very first Mummy film from Universal, right? The Karloff film. There's really no films that are exactly like that. Um, Certainly, Blood from a Mummy's Tomb is unlike anything that Universal did. You can make the argument that the um, first two Hammer Mummy movies are a lot like the
The
original
the
sequels,
sequels, yeah,
right, on the Universal side. But otherwise, they went a different route. And I think also the fact that these films were in color really helped them quite a bit because there was a kind of a similar look and feel and formula about all those Universal films. I enjoyed them. I rewatched them all recently and I enjoy them, but I could see why a lot of people would be like, yeah, this shit's boring. It's just like the same, there's Cheney lumbering around and and every movie is kind of exactly the same. It's like, all right, feed him the Tana leaves. He's back from the dead. Okay, whatever. The end of the movie, we burn him or we go back into the swamp or whatever happens, right? They do some different stuff with these films, which I think is cool. And like I said, having them in color really, really helps them. I mean, these are really nice looking films, whereas the Universal films, yeah, they're in black and white, but I mean, there's plenty of black and white films that look really, really great. Look at, I mean, we talked about the Val Lewton films, right? There's
yeah.
plenty of the Wolfman, right? I mean, those are great looking films. And the Mummy films are kind of drab, right? These are not at all. These are
Oh,
not.
for sure. And, growing up as a kid in the 70s, watching these movies on regular TV, when one of the Universal monster movies came up, it was in black and white. So to me, as a kid, 5, 6 years old, it was automatically an old movie. But, watching, whatever Hammer movie it was in color. So in, 1975, all these Hammer movies from the 50s and 60s and early 70s didn't seem as dated.
Yeah, I mean, even 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line for me, growing up in the 90s with BBC Two would have a Universal and then a Hammer usually afterwards, or an Amicus afterwards. And yeah, that was the kind of feel where it was like, right, I like the atmosphere of the Universals. I mean, we're not going to diss the Universals on here at all, but there's a real vibrancy because you can now have a little bit of sexuality. You can have some underboob, you can have blood. Kensington Gore, as it became known, that ridiculously vibrant red hammer blood that they used.
Well, look at Curse of
So,
Frankenstein, perfect example.
Yeah.
Lots of
mhm,
cleavage, and for the first time, you're seeing blood and gore, as
yeah,
white as can be, right? Whereas there's barely a touch of
No,
blood in any of
nothing.
the
Yeah.
Universal films, right?
yeah, and it's that they embraced from. Funnily enough, it's just been announced for 4K today, as we discussed in the chat. They embraced the X certificate, starting with the Quatermass experiment, where they put an X in the experiment instead of an EX to say, hey, we've got an X rating, so you have to come to the cinemas to see these exciting dark movies because you can't get away with it on television. So come to the cinema for these really horrific, scary films, and you might see some cleavage, and you'll see some horrendous things. Of course, you can show them in the afternoon now, and nobody would bat an eyelid. But bless them, they're fantastic. And you're right, it does feel like, even though you're just adding color and a little bit of gore, it feels like a whole different
Yeah,
generation, even though it's only a few years. It's remarkable.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So for folks watching, you've got our rankings, right? But as we've stated, all four of these are very much worth seeing. So if you haven't checked them out, find a place where you can watch them. You can go get all these on Blu-ray and various incarnations. And we've held up all sorts of different sets here today. So Davey's got a bunch of box sets that some of these are on that have been released over there. We've got here. What do we got here? We got oh, this is what, a Columbia release. We got a couple Scream Factories, and then this is a Warner Brothers. So I mean, there's just
Yeah, I mean, people always ask us in the comments why don't they do a complete box set, and that's the reason. Because why would Columbia let Universal, or why would Warner Brothers let Studio Canal have their, you're dealing with these massive corporations to sell a few thousand discs. It's never going to happen. These aren't big enough films for that. So you end up having to get them individually on bizarre sets. I mean, Pete and I have both got that. And it's such a we
Yeah,
talked
that's
about
the
it
one I've got
before.
too, which I had to buy off eBay at an inflated price because it went out of print.
oh yeah,
And it's called Volume One. There was never a Volume Two.
Right.
It barely says Hammer. It's in tiny writing there,
yeah,
and the films are so random. The Mummy, Taste the Blood of Dracula, Dracula has risen from the grave, and Frankenstein must be destroyed. But again, it's just what they own.
yeah,
So the Hammer films are almost like a little adventure series where you have to go and seek them out and go on, a little quest to get them. There's something quite romantic about it compared to the Universals, where you can just buy a big box set of the whole bloody lot because
yes,
they were all made by Universal, funnily
yeah,
enough.
I know. And as not to derail the conversation, but as we've been talking about in our Monsters Den chat like all day, they have now been releasing these big deluxe 4K editions, or they have some in the pipeline of like films that you wouldn't expect that they would do it on, right? So we've got Chronos
So
was fairly
the
recent.
first one was Chronos Vampire Hunter that I've got a video on my channel if people want to see it. The second one is just about to be released. Sorry, second one has already been released. That's Four-Sided Triangle. The third one is Shatter from the 70s. I mean, that's the film that pretty much bankrupted Hammer. It's so bizarre that they're giving this a deluxe. But anyway, the order's very strange. But excitingly, as I said, number four was announced today, and it's a 5-disc 4K of the Quatermass Experiment, which that will do.
Oh, great film, yeah, yeah.
And we are getting Curse of Frankenstein. We are getting The Mummy. We are getting the original Dracula. Is it Horror of Dracula? It's called over there.
In the States, yeah.
Yeah, so they are all owned by Hammer, and there are multiple box sets being worked on at the moment. So, but if you don't want the big fancy box sets, they've already released a standard edition of Captain Kronos, for example. So, you don't need to spend $90 or whatever it would be to import it. Especially with tariffs as they might be these days. So yeah, fantastic stuff. Real treasure trove, Hammer. We love it to bits. We must have done a million videos on them. We could do a million more, but God bless them.
Anything, how many times we've bought in these things?
Oh, I just when Davies rattling them off, I'm like, Jesus, I bought the Captain Kronos import Blu-ray. I bought was it the BFI edition,
Mhm.
uncut version of Horror of Dracula.
Mhm.
The import cost me a ton to get on eBay. The import Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell Blu-ray.
Yeah, I
I
see
had to
this.
overpay to get the Mummy on that box set that you guys have. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, it's non-stop. But again, there is, we're privileged enough to be able to do it. Let's be, we're
Yeah.
not but again, I quite enjoy the chase.
It is
Well, it's the
exciting, right?
thrill of the hunt. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's much as you think about like how much you spent over the years. Like I had so many of these that were available on VHS, and then I had a huge Hammer DVD collection, and a lot of those
Yeah.
Anchor Bay ones that had the two
Yep.
on one
I
Yeah.
had them all.
and then like, and Chris, you remember because we had already started the show back then. I made a mission like probably I don't know 4 years ago, 5 year, whatever it was. It was during COVID where they were starting to. They had released so many of the Harrow movies on Blu-ray, so I went and replaced all my DVDs except for a couple. There's still a few that have not been released. Like I got
I've still got the Lost
and
Continent on
She, and if you
DVD.
have, I have a few others that are still on DVD.
Yep,
But I
She. Yep, I have that on DVD
Yeah,
too.
she is owned by Warner Brothers, and that is the biggest by far that's not been released.
yeah.
I mean, for a long time, the Vampire Lovers was the one, but she is the one that we need. I mean, we've got the Vengeance of She, for goodness sake, and that's crap. That's out on Blu-ray. I mean, I've got over 100 Hammer Blu-rays, and there's still quite a lot that need upgraded, as I think we might have talked about back in our, upgrades episode. I've
Like,
got a Blu-ray of that's out from Australia.
and I probably should just because I have the region free player now, so I probably should do that. Creatures the World Forgot,
That's out on Blu-ray.
Viking Queen,
Oh, yep, forgot
and
about that one.
Crescendo. These are and then
Yeah.
I've got all the what is it? The,
Crescendo's now.
Hammer, the TV show and the film.
Well, the TV show, The Hammer House of Horror, is out on Blu-ray from Network, but the other TV show is not. The House of Mystery and Suspense, that's only DVD, and that's the kind of forgotten TV show from the 80s. And then Moon Zero Two, that's another. I like that film, sci-fi movie with what is it, Lionel Jeffries that's in it. That needs an upgrade, so yeah,
But everything else I bought on Blu-ray, and now they're starting to come out on 4K. It's just like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I just spent so much money replacing all these over the last bunch of years. It never ends, man.
No, it
Yeah.
never does.
and
Well,
Studio
maybe
Canal.
this will be it for 4K. Maybe this will be it.
Yeah, I mean, some of them won't even be on 4K because the elements just aren't there to be that high
Yeah.
quality. But yeah, I think we have reached that point where, we'll be buying just for more extras, to be honest. There's nothing quality-wise that can be done. But Jesus, you see some of the restorations. I mean, Chris, the one you mentioned there, the Dracula restoration by the BFI,
Unbelievable, yeah.
that's unreal. I remember the upgrade from DVD to that. It's just like night and day.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's fantastic, essential stuff, and it's so much better than the Warner Archive Blu-ray version.
Oh,
Which is what I have,
100%,
which
yeah.
looks good. But yeah,
yeah,
I probably should have. Yeah. Well, you said that's coming on 4K? I'll wait.
yeah, next year.
wait.
So again,
No,
this
no
is,
need to do anything between now and then.
Yeah.
as you said, we don't want it to go on too long, but that's why I think they've made him. You don't want to tell people how to do their jobs, but I think if they'd started with some of the really big ones, then people would have collected them and then say, because they want the big ones. And then when you release a couple of smaller ones, they'd say, well, I'll get
Oh,
them just to complete
Just to
the
have for
set.
the collection. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Do it reverse
Whereas-
doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, whereas if you start with Shatter and the four-sided triangle, people are just going to go, I mean, I'll get them. 'cause
Well,
I'm a
of all the
completist.
vampire ones, I like Captain Kronos, but right to start with that one, it's
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
And they started with the easiest ones that were easy to restore and they don't need a lot of work. That's the real answer. But yeah, they should have started with Quatermass or something, and then Dracula or something, and then people would have been on board straight away. Because I know so many Hammer fans that who I thought were like me and were total completists. But they won't pay £60 for a Captain Kronos box set, or certainly won't pay £45 for a four-sided triangle box set. So yeah, I think they've kind of misjudged the marketing for that one, the release strategy for that one. They should have done it much more like a build the set, get them all, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which
I'm all in for the 5-disc Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, though. 100%. Charge me
Yeah.
whatever. I want all the discs on that.
yeah, and then maybe they'll make a good edit, which will be about three minutes long.
You guys will never agree on that film.
No, I love that movie.
No, but fun to disagree about it. And as I always say, Peter Cushing get paid for it, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I'm sure he had a blast doing it. So. All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode of the Monsters Den. So if you are fans of these films, rank them as you like them down in the comments below. And if, like I said, if you haven't seen them, go check them out. These are pretty damn good mummy films. Even if one of them kind of isn't a mummy film, in name, sort of, but it's a pretty wonderful movie. So
Yeah,
don't miss it.
if you want a good adventure film, go for the original. If you want a more interesting, deeper film, go for Blood, the last film from 71.
And if you just want crazy mummy mayhem, those are the two in the middle. So
Yeah, yeah.
So cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together.
All the
All the
damn
damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. I believe our next episode is going to be about some of our favorite bloody war films. So stay tuned for that next month. And till then, for Chris and Davey, I'm Pete. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Thanks from the Monsters Den. Bye-bye.